Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Church in Fall River, Massachusetts.
Good morning. I'm Reverend Vera O'Brien, and I'm very happy to be back with you this morning. Since the last time I was here, I might have retired. I definitely sold my house and I moved to Rhode Island. It's a shorter commute to get here from where I live now. But it's really nice to see you all again and to maybe meet some new people too. We are Unitarian Universalists. Ours is a historic faith with a progressive theology. We affirm the worth and dignity of every being and that we are all deeply interconnected. We are bound to one another, not by creed, but by covenant, and we are called to love with open minds, open hearts, and open hands. Whoever you are, those of all nations, all creeds, all colors, all kinds of love, you are welcome here. My chalice lighting are the words of Melanie Davis. If ever there was a time for a candle in the darkness, this would be it. Using a spark of hope, kindle the flame of love, ignite the light of peace, and feed the flame of justice. My invocation are the words of Bruce Southworth. Spring has burst forth with its wet welcome, and now with its clear skies. The seasons of our souls respond with gladness that new life shall welcome us to another year of growing. Let us celebrate our meeting here today. Let us be filled with the new season. Let us turn from side to side with eyes that meet and smiles that proclaim our community. We pause together this morning out of the midst of separate lives to give thanks, to be strengthened and refreshed, and to share our search for wisdom and gentleness. Richard pointed out something that I didn't know, that you might not know either, but I chose 2 hymns for the service today, where the words were written by Samuel Longfellow, who lived from 1819 to 1892, and who served this very church. What's the likelihood of that? And I really appreciate knowing that, because if I'd known that, I would have tried to do that. I'm going to talk a little bit about this hymn, so you might think about the words a little bit more than you might ordinarily singing an opening hymn, which is number 12, O Life That Maketh All Things New. We continue with our affirmation printed in the order of service. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve human need, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God. Are there announcements this morning?
Good morning, everyone. Vera, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to come and join us again today. I'm really happy. We haven't seen you in a few years, a couple of years, I think. And we're going to see you again later, I think, right?
May 11th.
Okay, great. And I want to let everyone know that we have a new minister join. Well, a new, he's not actually a minister, he's a student, which is called a seminary. But he is an ordained rabbi. His name is Trepley, so he's a young man, so we're going to try to make him feel comfortable. Thanks.
So yes, I took the margarita with it. I went out with coffee. I don't know who you gave credit for though, because it was frozen from the bottle.
Carol.
Okay, well, let's look at it. Thank you. Also, I didn't know what to do this up, so I was just going to bring it down. But the Flower Bride Committee has already started accepting vendors to the bribery, and just on the web when I saw the open registration, I reserved 2 booths. So I don't know if you want to like the 2 hours in the church fair.
Can you give us some information on that?
We scheduled a table to be available already. I talked to Sean Connell and reserved a table. We usually, 1 or 2 or 3 of us from the congregation go and spend the day.
Cool, I want to do it.
Yeah, okay. I usually go to it, yeah.
So it'd be wonderful to expand on that, and maybe the service of that weekend, I don't know if it's already scheduled, for the first Sunday in June, would be a good Pride service, in terms of that's.
I always mark that down, but I do it to the minister.
Right.
Thank you. This reading is called A Blessing for Hope and Renewal. May hope be your GPS. May you take each turn on your path with intent, and when heavy moments rise, may you hear again the call of hope. May no shadow dull your spirit. May no despair intimidate your heart. May your path be dappled in lush dreams. May you know that dawn lifts many veils. May somber hours, as vast as they are, be a confluence of purpose and love. May your love and purpose walk together, for then the cosmos and you agree, and every action is a renewal of relationship. May hope be your global positioning system, and wisdom your center wherever you are. I have a responsive reading that's on an insert in your order of service. I'll start, and if you would respond with the bold indented print, that would be great. In the holy quiet of this promising hour of spring, may we purge ourselves of coldness of spirit, that warm spring breezes may thaw our souls. May slowness of spirit, frozen by cold, be quickened to every fresh possibility. May the grime of mistakes made be rinsed from our minds with the springtime waters of self-forgiveness. May we muster the strength to do our own spring house cleaning of the spirit. For our time of prayer or meditation, I have a short reflection drawn from the tradition of Lent that many people celebrate at this time of the year. But I think you'll see it's a very you version of that. I like it all year round. Fast from criticism and feast on praise. Fast from self-pity and feast on joy. Fast from ill temper and feast on peace. Fast from resentment and feast on contentment. Fast from jealousy and feast on love. Fast from pride and feast on humility. Fast from selfishness and feast on service. Fast from fear and feast on faith. Amen. We continue with Spirit of Life. I am literally surrounded by hope. Last fall, I sold my house and moved to a historic mill building, which was originally the site of the Hope Webbing Company. The company made webbing for the parachute cords used on D-Day in World War II. Part of the mill is now the Hope Village Lofts, where I live, and the other side is the Hope Artiste Village. I also frequently find myself on Hope Street, where I can't help but see a beautiful mural and garden in front of it that says, "Most of us live off hope." I go under the fabulously decorative Mount Hope Bridge frequently. and then I opened a magazine, Hope Changes Everything. It's the Hope Scholarship. I find myself needing these daily reminders of hope more now than ever. We live in difficult times, times of great uncertainty, a time when despair can arise more easily than hope for many of us. But what is hope? I doubt I'm alone in somewhat automatically responding with Emily Dickinson's, "Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings that tune without the words and never stops at all." Hope, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, is to cherish a desire with anticipation. Catherine Rue says, practical hope can lead to grit and perseverance. When we are hopeful, gritty people, we are able to choose that path of action that might go well, not just the path which is very likely to go well. How can we find hope, grit, and perseverance in times of uncertainty or despair? We might look first at the world around us, in the life that maketh all things new, as we sang together. Reverend Kimberly DeBue calls herself an entrepreneurial minister, and she writes a lot about all of the hymns in our hymn books. On her website, Notes from the Far Fringe. When she writes about the first hymn we sang together, she says, "This hymn feels extraordinarily aspirational to me today. There doesn't seem to be much in the way of truth or freedom or joy or any space at all to have larger, wider thoughts about anything, let alone the divine. Yet here it is, a life that makes all things new, not worn, reused, not tired, new. Then the blooming earth, our thoughts within. Even as the seasons cycle through, so will or should our thoughts. Our pilgrim feet wet with thy dew. We are always searching, seeking more. In gladness hither turn again." And she says, thank goodness life does make all things new, because we need it that way for our sanity. We need to be refreshed, renewed, revived, and clearly, and reminded that this does happen. It does get better, it does get easier. Today's heaviness and worry will morph and change, and sometimes become harder, and sometimes turn to joy. But life is here to remind us that it happens to all of us, and there is newness always, because that is the very nature of life. Some of us have watched this cycle of the seasons, this rebirth of spring for a long time. It never fails to inspire me. We might find inspiration in the words and deeds of others. Gandhi said, "When I despair, I remember that all through history, the way of truth and love has always won. Yes, there have been murderers and tyrants, and for a time they can seem invincible, but in the end, they always fall. Think of it always." It's easy for me, at least, to overlook this important point. As Gandhi says, the way of truth and love has always won. I can also easily forget all the really significant changes that were fought for in our lifetimes, or that our parents and grandparents witnesses. Yes, there were horrors too, But here's just one example, since it's Women's History Month. I can forget that women couldn't vote until 1920. Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott began this effort in 1848. They were later joined by Unitarian Susan B. Anthony. Interracial marriage was illegal until 1967. Marriage equality wasn't legal in Massachusetts until May of 2004. I think if we put up poster paper around the sanctuary, we could make a pretty lengthy list of all the important changes that have taken place. Howard Zinn, if you might remember, is the author of A People's History of the United States, said to be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic, it's based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, and kindness. What we choose to emphasize in this complex history will determine our lives. If we see only the worst, it destroys our capacity to do something good. But if we remember the times and places, and there have been so many, where people have behaved magnificently, this gives us the energy to act and the possibility of sending the spinning top of the world in a fine direction. I really like that. People who behaved magnificently. I believe that despite what we may see or hear every day in the news, that many more people than we hear about are behaving magnificently. I'm not talking about famous people, but rather the people of our day-to-day lives, doing good work, helping neighbors, volunteering, doing what they can. Holding coat drives like you did here in the congregation not that long ago. Whenever I visit, there are always announcements about the ways people can help the community in one way or another, like today about Pride. First Unitarian Church in Providence will be distributing almost 10,000 pairs of Bombas socks. The company advertises that they donate a pair for each pair purchased. I was always a little skeptical about that, but I'm glad to see firsthand that they really do this. It gives me hope. I believe we can underestimate the importance of these less publicized efforts made by so many when we are faced with so much dismaying news. But as Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Buddhist teacher Joan Halifax introduced me to the idea of wise hope. She says, ordinary hope is based in desire, wanting an outcome that could well be different from what will actually happen. And then not getting what we hoped for is usually experienced as a type of misfortune. Someone who's hopeful in this ordinary way has an expectation that always hovers in the background, the shadow of fear that one's wishes will not be fulfilled. Wise hope isn't seeing things unrealistically, but seeing things as they are, including the truth of suffering, both its existence and our capacity to transform it. It's when we realize we don't know what will happen that this wise hope comes alive. In the spaciousness of uncertainty is the very space we need to act. I'm trying to adopt this idea to consider increased uncertainty as space open to new possibilities and new actions. Wise hope sees the reality of our times and knows that we are not powerless. Wise hope acknowledges the suffering around us, but sees the possibilities for healing. Wise hope is knowing that our small efforts do matter. Similarly, the Czech statesman Václav Havel said, "Hope is definitely not the same as optimism. It is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that something we do makes sense regardless of how it turns out." I remember in 2003 going to witness the proceedings at the State House when marriage equality was being debated here in Massachusetts. We didn't know how things would turn out, but we did know that what we were doing made sense. Showing up required hope, but was also true to our values and to our UU principles of honoring the worth and dignity of every person. Hope is more powerful than optimism because it involves personal agency and a sense of power and motivation. Hope can motivate us to make progress happen. We can't know for sure when we join a new effort that it will succeed, but we can trust that there will be change and that we will be part of it. And even if we don't succeed, we will learn something from our efforts and are likely to create new connections in the community. Rebecca Solnit, the author of Hope in the Dark, says, "Hope is not prognostication. It's an orientation of the heart. It transcends the world that is immediately experienced and is anchored somewhere beyond its horizons. Hope in this deep and powerful sense is not the same as joy that things are going well, but rather an ability to work for something because it is good, not because it stands a chance to succeed." I would add, hope is an antidote to the paralysis that despair can cause. As Unitarian minister and abolitionist Reverend Theodore Parker said in an 1852 sermon entitled "Justice and the Conscience," "You see a continual and progressive triumph of right. I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eyes reach but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by the experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. But from what I see, I am sure it bends towards justice." Does this sound a little familiar? Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. summarized it this way: "The arc of the moral universe is long but bends towards justice." We may not see the fruits of our labor in our lives, but that can't stop us from acting with the courage and the hope in pursuit of justice. The suffragettes I mentioned earlier, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan Anthony, introduced an amendment to give women the vote in 1878. Sadly, they did not live long enough to see it ratified and to be able to vote in 1920. But they trusted that their efforts would come to fruition. They trusted in the community of suffragettes that were committed to seeing this change regardless of how long it took. They believed they were on the path to justice. Reverend Peter Gomes, an American Baptist minister who during his life was a force to be reckoned with in Plymouth, where I lived, and also at Harvard, where he taught, said, "Sometimes hope seems shabby and miserable, inadequate when we are surrounded by the mendacity and mediocrity of the world." He said, "Hope, you see, is not an act of will so much as an act of imagination and courage." He tells a story about an article in the Washington Post many years ago during the Cold War. A features reporter asked the British ambassador to the United States what he wanted for Christmas. He didn't want to appear greedy, and he wanted to be truthful. And he said the only thing he really wanted was a jar of fruit preserved in ginger, like they would have at Harrods at home in London if he was there. A few days later, the Post reported on what the diplomatic corps in Washington, D.C. hoped for Christmas. The Russian ambassador hoped for peace and goodwill. The Swiss ambassador hoped for genuine disarmament around the world. The Israeli ambassador hoped for peace in the Middle East, and so on and so forth. Sir Nicholas, the British ambassador, was quoted as wanting a jar of preserved fruit. Sir Nicholas's hope was the most obtainable, and he was doubtless the only one who got what he wanted that Christmas. But his hope seemed to lack a little in courage or imagination. Sometimes we do not hope enough. Let's be courageous and imagine big hopes and do our small part to make them happen. I invite you in this season of spring, when life maketh all things new all around us, to identify a big hope that you are passionate about if you haven't already, and to find a small next step to translate your hope into action and reality. One of my big hopes is for the resurgence of critical thinking. My small step is volunteering with Books Are Wings, a very small nonprofit in my Hope Village building that distributed over 67,000 free books to elementary school students in Rhode Island in just 2024. I am reading really fun books in classrooms and hosting book parties in the same schools, where each child chooses 2 free books to bring home. As one child said to me with huge surprised eyes, "To bring home forever?" Yes, forever. Teachers have said that many of these children have never had their own books before. I am hopeful that even just a few will discover a love of reading and lifelong learning. And I won't know how this turns out, but it makes sense to me. Being with these children is also so joyful that it revives and renews my spirit for the other hard work that needs to be done in our communities. Another big hope is that current events in this country will lead to new commitments and action to support our libraries, our national parks, climate change, diversity, equity, and inclusion, immigration, science, international aid. I could go on and on. If you haven't heard, April 5th is a nationwide opportunity to make our voices heard. In all 50 states, about recent budget cuts to community services throughout the country. And of course, the one in Rhode Island is starting at Hope High School. Finally, another big hope is that history will look back and see how many people and how many organizations acted magnificently in an infinite number of ways to heal and rebuild our country, and that we will see ourselves, our congregations, and our Unitarian Universalist denomination among them. Amen. We continue with the offering to sustain and strengthen this place, which is sacred to so many of us as a community of hope, for we are now the keepers of the dream. This is the time in our service for the sharing of joys and concerns.
Well, we just like anything that is, Walter and Jim, Nancy's Jim, and I call him Nancy's Jim. Walter and Jim are playing at a soup kitchen this morning, which is right here in Providence, and it's at a church, and it's kind of a, very Christian church, and I just thought you'd get a kick out of it, but I overheard Dave and Walter talking about the songs they could or couldn't do, because their repertoire is very bluesy and a lot of drinking and womanizing. So they were deciding what things they should leave out. And there was one that had particularly, bad behavior in it, but the chorus line goes, Lord, you've got to help me now. So they thought they could keep that one in because they were asking for it. So I can't figure out.
And doing their small part in the world.
So I'm going to ask you to keep in memory the person Rob Yaffe. Little Rob Yaffe is 70 years old, passed on. He's been credited in articles that have written of his contribution in leadership in vegetarian cuisine in Providence. He really set the pace. If ever you're a Kentucky, part of his legacy is the Green Garden.
Garden Grill.
And a cafe next door to it.
Yep.
Rob was instrumental in establishing. I met Rob in 1970 out of college. His father was running for Congress at the time, the Atlanta, Georgia veteran, air pilot, I believe, progressive Jewish American Fall River industrialist, and little Robbie was one of the kids from the ground. So Robbie always wanted to have a tribute here in Fall River. I called, reached out to his sister and family, and we're going to need to talk about that because the commitment of this young man really was instrumental in not only my life, but many, many lives of people that wanted to have a more pure vegetarian experience. And he did it religiously. So keep Rob the athlete in the memory.
I have a joy. Guess what? Red Sox season's starting up. Oh, boy. Watch out for them.
That could be both a joy and a concern.
So from my window, I can see Mount Hope
Oh, wow.
across the bay, yeah. And my little 10-year-old granddaughter is named Winston.
Oh,
We call
Wow.
her Miss Hope, affectionately. But she is so creative. You give her some Scotch tape and a piece of cardboard, and she'll build a castle.
Wow.
So, she's going to be a feminine force to be reckoned with. Thank you.
And that generation gives us hope for the future. Let us take just a moment of silence for those joys and sorrows that remain unexpressed in our hearts and our minds. Let us continue with hymn number 345, With Joy We Share the Growing Light. Standing in body or spirit. Please be seated. As you prepare to leave this sacred space, pack away a piece of this church in your heart. Wrap it carefully like a precious gem. Carry it with you through the joys and sorrows of your days. Let its gentle glow strengthen you, warm you, and remind you of all that is good and true, until you gather again in this place of love. Amen. I wanted to sing along.